This week on IT SPARC Cast, John and Lou beat up on Microsoft again, phishing goes old school, and Linux loses control with perf control. Greetings and welcome to the IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's go take a look at what's going on.
It's Friday, October 11th. SPARCcast is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts with over 20 years of experience in IT or working for IT vendors. As we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we'll be changing our format. We really want to keep each episode to 30 to 40 minutes, and we found that in order to hit that target, we were cutting out too many important news topics. So going forward on Fridays, we will be just reading out the news and giving you our opinions on what the news headlines are all about. And then on Wednesdays, we'll be issuing a separate episode in which we will have our editorials and hot takes, things like our thoughts on working from home, AI in K-12, and a number of other topics. So with that said, let's get to the news bites.
Wait a second. Are you feeling secure? Not after this podcast.
Yeah, so in an article in Macworld, it turns out that Microsoft's Mac apps have a security hole that they're not going to be fixing anytime soon. So the effective apps we're talking about are Excel, OneNote, Outlook, PowerPoint, Teams, and Word. So it's basically the full suite. With this vulnerability, the reason there's a vulnerability there is that Microsoft has an entitlement that disables the macOS hardened runtimes. It allows them to run non-secure DLLs. So why Apple allows them to do this is unclear, other than the fact that Apple just needs Microsoft to be running on there. But these hackers could gain privileges on your system that would allow them to execute code and do all kinds of other malicious things. So this is a really scary one. And the worst part is that Microsoft has fixed the vulnerability on Teams and Outlook, but they are not going to be fixing anytime soon the other Office applications. So that's PowerPoint, Word, and so forth. So, Lou, the question here for me is, why? First of all, why does an application like Word and PowerPoint need access to potentially insecure DLLs and to bypass the security restrictions built into the Mac OS? And why aren't they taking it seriously? I've got my own thoughts on this, but I want to hear from you first.
Honestly, who's ever heard of Microsoft and DLL problems before? Just kidding. We all have. So my personal take on this is that Microsoft has not been able to tame the DLL beast. And instead of fixing the DLLs, they're simply working around the DLLs. That would be my take on seeing this. Now, yeah. I'm interested in what you think about this because you've got a lot more development experience than I have.
I do. I've actually built DLLs in the past for Windows in a previous life. So for anybody that doesn't know, a DLL is a dynamic link library. So a library is what is effectively a set of APIs, and your code would call them to execute functions and to gain more capabilities, gain access to drivers and things like that. And a DLL is a separate file that is already compiled and you have access to in real time and can be updated separately versus compiling a library directly into your code. So my take on this is twofold. One is, on why Apple is allowing this. It has to be the money factor in that Apple needs Microsoft Office running on their platform. And I'm guessing this is pure guesswork, but Microsoft saying, well, if we're gonna run on your platform, we need this unrestricted access, which is really concerning, especially after the CrowdStrike piece, because that's sort of what's going on with when the CrowdStrike outage is. CrowdStrike was embedded in the kernel of the Windows operating system, and because of their problems, that caused those catastrophic failures. So now we're finding out that Microsoft has or at least less restrictive access to the Macintosh OS, and that's really concerning. The other side of it is, why aren't they going to address this any sooner and they're just claiming it's a low risk vulnerability. But I think that, I don't know all the attack vectors. I don't think we all know what the attack vectors are, but, is it possible that you can get an infected document? If that's the case, then people download documents all the time, and an infected document could cause this. I don't know if that's one of the attack vectors, but I also think that in Microsoft's mind, the Macintosh world is a second-class citizen. It's not as important. It's important that they're running, but not as important that they don't have problems. I've seen capabilities in Outlook that better support iCloud environments than the Mac version of Outlook. So, for example, I can't integrate my iCloud calendars into the Macintosh version of Outlook. I can in the Windows version of Outlook, and that's been true for 15 years. So it just seems like, again, less priority is put onto the Macintosh version of their Office tools, which, their main thing is to run on Windows. I get that. But this is really concerning for me. And I think that, I don't know that we got anything we can do about it, but it is concerning.
And the thing is, we were discussing this, and if you've worked with Microsoft on this stuff, you realize that you're not working with one Microsoft. You're working with a whole bunch of Microsoft, right? So you never know where the roadblock is. Usually, I've engaged with them on some projects that were absolutely delightful, very professional. This seems to be a function of big company and product marketing not talking to each other. But we really don't know.
Yeah. So during the prep call, Lou and I talked about this, and there's a term that's an old term, and it's coming back here, is co-opetition. Mm-hmm. And in that previous company where I mentioned I had written DLLs, we had a product that competed with some Microsoft products, but were dependent and enhancing to other Microsoft products. So the operating system folks loved us, but the Visual Basic folks, because the product I was working with was a competitor to Visual Basic, hated us. They were trying to kill us. So when you have a conflict like that, then that's just going to naturally lead to issues that, of this nature. So that's unfortunate.
It really is.
But Lou, you got a topic.
I do. Are you feeling all safe in your air gap network? Well, we punched a little hole in that back in our cast on the lucky day of September 13th. Let's go back and take a look at a new potential thing that paired with that potential exfiltration thing could be really nasty. This comes to us via Ars Technica, and researchers have unearthed two sophisticated tool sets from nation-state hacking groups. Probably from Russia seems to be the current thinking. ESET was the one that discovered this, and it's designed to steal sensitive data stored over air-gapped devices, meaning those that are deliberately isolated from the internet and networks to safeguard them. So this is a common tactic in military. This is a common tactic in sensitive R&D and other systems. So it's a suite of tools that have been written. They've seen evolution of this, but there's three main pieces, it appears. There's Golden Dealer, which allows malicious executors to air gap networks over USB drives. So the key thing is, how do you get that in there? The first thing you got to do is suborn a person, right? Or unknowingly, well, what's the old good one that we've all seen for pen testing? Get a bunch of high capacity drives, spread them out in a parking lot.
USB drives, yeah.
USB drives, spread them out in a parking lot. That works quite a bit more than it should. All you have to do is get that one thing in there, because then the dealer goes in and breaks in. Golden Howl is the backdoor that contains the modules for the malicious capabilities. And then there's Golden Robo, which is the file collector and exfiltrator. Now, what we talked about on September 13th was some research by an Israeli researcher, very good, talked about various ways that you could modulate a computer's memory or other features on your system to actually transmit a signal. So if you were to take this and combine it with that would be really nasty. Check your Faraday shielding around your systems. Make sure you have a centralized way of before anybody touches that system, it has to be tested by a system that that is known, not compromised. But this one, it's a state level. Now, to give you some example of what a state level hack can do, once upon a time, back in my younger days, I was on the show network for supercomputing. We saw somebody go in, hack a compute complex within a network device, and then when it was discovered, because they didn't freeze the system and virtualize it, the hack erased itself. So this is extremely sophisticated tooling. Probably if you're commercial, you might not see it, but you need to know about this. If you're on an air-gapped network, make extra sure that any data storage device that goes onto that network has been checked multiple times on systems that can be verified clean.
Yeah. So as IT professionals, a lot of us spend a lot of time hardening our systems, making sure our firewall is up to date, making sure that we've got a lot of protections in place. But at the end of the day, one of the biggest vulnerabilities we have is the human factor. And again, if you can trick somebody, compromise somebody, or entice somebody to do something that maybe they wouldn't normally do, then your networking become vulnerable. So we have to include training. In government cases, obviously the background checks help there and monitoring of that. But as we said on the 13th, I mean, the movie scenario where somebody walks in, sneaks in to an environment as a spy, and they set down a device next to a computer and it just magically transfers data off of that system was science fiction. But now with these two pieces together, it's no longer science fiction. This is something that could actually happen in the real world. You put a vulnerability in, it starts modulating the RAM, able to read information off of that RAM, and then you capture it. And you don't even necessarily have to be right next to the computer. You got to be somewhat close. And you got to have no shielding between you, but you got to be close enough to catch that signal. And now science fiction is real, and the compromise is real.
Well, at least we can always count on being able to go phishing as being old school, right?
Right. So speaking of humans being the vulnerable link, PC World is letting you know to beware of this, what they call a new phishing scam that could arrive in your mailbox. And I don't mean your email box. We're talking about physical mail. So according to PC World, they're talking about this old school social engineering is still a thing, and it's something that we need to be worried about. So what happens is, and this is being seen in Germany right now, and the German State Office of Criminal Investigations of Lower Saxony is issuing a warning. And they're saying that what they're seeing is mail showing up, physical mail showing up at people's homes or their offices that look like it's from one of the banks, and Deutsche Bank's one of them, and then there's several others. And what's happening is that there's a URL to type in or a QR code to go and address an issue with your banking system. Now, all of that's fair. Maybe you work for a bank, so maybe as an IT professional, you need to know about that. But the point that I want to bring up here again is that social engineering has been a thing for longer than there have been desktop computers. And since the 50s and the 60s, social engineering was a thing. Dumpster diving to get information, and then you reach out and you call somebody and you get them to say that, to give up their password or whatever it is. This is just a more modern version of that, where you could have somebody get a note, physical note, or an email saying, "Hey, I need you to log into the work system and make a change." This can happen. It can happen to even the most sophisticated of us. I actually got hit by a Netflix phishing attack 3 or 4 years ago. It was late at night. It was tired. One of my credit cards had expired, and I got a new one. And I got a note from what looked like Netflix saying, something's wrong with your credit card. You need to enter your new details. All right, cool. So I made sense, since my credit card had just expired and got a new one. I tapped the link. It asked me for my Netflix password. I put in my Netflix password, and as soon as I hit enter, it's like, my phone knows my Netflix password. It should have entered it automatically, as it would do when it detected that it was on Netflix.com. I looked closely at the URL, and it was not netflix.com. It was a variation of the spelling that, once you looked closely, you saw that wasn't it. So luckily I didn't enter my my credit card, but I did enter my password. So now that password was compromised, and I changed it, and that's all fine. I changed it immediately, so there was really no real impact at that point. But even somebody, and I may not be as sophisticated as some of you that are listening, but I'm as sophisticated as you're going to find in a lot of cases when it comes to cybersecurity. And even I got tricked. So if I can get tricked, then anybody can. So again, beware of QR codes, just like you should be aware of USB sticks laying around in the parking lot. QR codes can be dangerous as well. And the point here is that as hardened as we make our systems, humans can be the vulnerable attack vector, and education and testing of your staff, your entire organization is key.
It's really tough to be skeptical all the time, but unfortunately we have to be. We live in a time where it's very easy to generate very authentic looking false information. And sometimes that information comes from someone we really trust.
It does. So, but I do want to mention at the last organization that Lou and I worked for, the chief information security officer was outstanding. He was top notch, and he made sure to make things that they weren't too onerous, but they were secure. And one of the things that he implemented was regular tests of the entire organization. The IT group would send out phishing emails to see how many people would click on it. And the click rate was surprising. So obviously it didn't come from us. It came from some random, other source. Obviously it did come from us, but it didn't look like it really. And we would get X number of people clicking on those links. We would get reports on it as management levels. We would say that X number of people in your team were clicking on this. We need more education. They had an ability in Outlook to hit a button to report things. They would give us the report of how many people clicked to report them, and so forth. So think about those types of policies. If you don't already have them in place, be prepared for cybersecurity training for your entire organization. And while you're not going to be popular for implementing cybersecurity training, it is something you're going to have to really think about.
Speaking of things that actually probably need more training, let's move on to the next one. So this we picked up via The Verge. Excellent thing. And the question is, now we internally, when we're developing these things, we put little captions on what we think is going on. This one was filed under news, well, duh, right? Which is, what if tech's problem is management? So there's a book due out next April. We just got word of this from an author by the name of Daryl Campbell, and its name is Fatal Abstraction. And it's arguing that many of the big tech issues are related to managerialism. Now, we've talked a lot about some of the challenges with remote work, actually going back to how we manage people that was established during the industrial age when we were all in factories. We still have challenges with that. There's too many folks out there that haven't heard of Peter Drucker or understand MBOs. Sales tends to get that, but we need it everywhere else. So digital technology was supposed to change the world for the better, but it has left us miserable, divided, and misinformed, is what the author thinks. I'm a little iffy on that one, but let's run with it for this. And essentially what he's saying is there's two things we're looking at here. One is an unshakable faith in management, right? Managerialism. The notion that every business can be reduced to a spreadsheet overseen by MBAs. I think everybody in tech has had this experience. John, I'm sure you have endless stories about this.
Yeah, as you said, we've spoken in the past about remote work and failure in remote work being, a management issue. But when you goal properly and motivate properly, you can deal with that. Now, that being said, there are some individuals that probably do need somebody on them all the time and need, probably some of your more junior, and that's not all junior folks, but the more junior you are, the more likely you are to need more help and guidance, and maybe some touch on the micromanagement side in order to get things done. But that's still a management problem. That's not that individual's fault, unless they just are lazy and just have no interest in doing the work. Then you've got a different management problem, and that you either have to figure out a way to motivate them, or unfortunately, if you can't, you move them out, and that's hopefully the last resort. But that is an option, because the reality is that any level of information work, whether you're in marketing, whether you're a graphics designer, whether you're a programmer, any other, like, your butt is in a chair and sitting in front of a computer kind of job, almost always can be done remote with proper management.
Well, there's another challenge here, and it's one that I've experienced personally, which is much of the C-suite does not understand what they're deploying. They don't even understand what they bought. I found myself in a position once at a partner conference at a past company, having to explain to a member of the C-suite what exactly they had just bought and what it did. Now, I see that as a massive failure on the terms of the acquisition team. But remember, how we produce MBAs, where they come from, what they do is not coupled to necessarily to the business solution. And this takes us to point number 2. There's a strong belief in software as a solution to all problems. And it's very prevalent in our industry. From airplane disasters to PowerPoint propaganda to the perils of generative AI. So Campbell is going to cover a bunch of patterns of recklessness and overconfidence. Now, once again, color me a little bit skeptical here. It's easy to dunk on where software didn't work and gloss over where it did. So, but I got to tell you, this one looks like it's going to be really interesting. So watch for us. We'll still be doing this stuff for a while. We've committed to this. We'll come back to this in April when the book releases. I'm very curious to see, but kind of wanted to get this into your head now, to prime it now, because think about those two things. Think about what management is sort of jumping over and blowing up in their face because they don't realize what they're actually trying to do, and how often we throw software in a problem. Maybe we should try something else. So speaking of what else is going on out there, John, what's Gartner telling us we should be looking at?
Yeah, so Gartner just released their top 10 strategic technology trends for 2024. And honestly, there's a lot to this, and it's a lot more than we can get into. But they're doing a lot of work with AI, trust, risks, security management. They're talking about dealing with continuous threat exposure management, and so many other topics. But a lot of things about AI, protecting yourself from AI, using AIs for development tools, using industry cloud platforms. So much here, and again, we could do a 2-hour webinar on all the information there. Gartner is always interesting as a relationship. That they have some really good information. They also sometimes there's a little bit of a pay for play there, so you always got to be careful of what you're getting from there. But they're generally pretty straightforward and honest and forward looking. So I would definitely take a look at this. We'll provide a link in the show notes. And as we go deeper into it, we'll probably be grabbing pieces of this and peppering it into future episodes. But with that, it's time for the CVE of the week.
Yes, we have a CVE because every week we will have one. And what's fun about this one is this one doesn't necessarily do anything hugely bad other than steal your power and your network connection. So I would consider this one more of a parasite, a code-developed parasite. It doesn't want to kill its host. It doesn't even want you to know it's there. So let's talk about what this thing is. It's called Perf Control, PERFCTL. And what this thing does, so when it gets into your hosts, it's looking for servers, things that are connected perpetually, not moving around much from an IP perspective, and have lots of resources. What are the resources you have that it likes? Processor, memory, storage, and bandwidth. So what does it do? It installs itself, and then it starts mining cryptocurrency, or it installs itself and it acts as a hub for other malicious network traffic, basically turning your host into a proxy. And the way it installs it is such as a classic rootkit example. It stealths itself from everything you're doing. So it stops, it cloaks itself in a bunch of tricks. So it stops activities that are easy to detect when a new user logs in. It uses Unix socket over Tor for external communication. So it's already pushing into sort of an abstracted network for its command system. It deletes the installation binary after it comes up and runs as a background service thereafter. So it's going to hide bits of itself all over the place, which is a known technique. Manipulates the Linux processes PCAP loop, so you can't see where it is, and it suppresses message errors to avoid showing up in the kernel log. So if you're watching the kernel log, you're not going to see this thing. What do you do about it? It's designed to be persistent. It's designed to be lightweight, and it's designed to not be detected. E.g., it's not going to encrypt all your data, although I suppose it could if you plug that toolkit in. So my recommendation, if you have a bunch of servers that are on the network all the time and you are not watching them with a packet-based analytics tool, you really need to rethink things. You can get tools from NetScout, Cisco, Extreme. There's a gazillion people out there that make this stuff. Even running periodic TCP dumps and throwing those suckers into Wireshark and looking for weird patterns, weird destinations, stuff like that is going to get you a window into seeing what this thing is doing. John, what have you seen in this space?
Well, so yeah, so there's, I mean, you mentioned some great tools out there. There's quite a few that can either be active or passively monitoring the network. You can have mirrors set out the network. You can have tools that actually built right into the switch, where the switch has analytic capabilities and maybe uses an offboard analytics tool to monitor that. There's all kinds of different tools out there, but it is something that's really critical, because this is like the ultimate in stealth vulnerability here. And while today it's really impacting you from the use of power and CPU and RAM and network, there's no reason why this couldn't be used for more nefarious purposes at a later date, as this is now becoming more and more known. And if you think about it, I mean, mining cryptocurrency is not a lightweight task. So we are talking about a material impact on a server as far as how much CPU it's using and processing that. And it could cause loss of productivity because of this. So keep an eye on where your packets are going. Are they going offshore? Do you just not recognize what this traffic is? Why is there Tor on my network? You should be thinking about that anyway. Like why is there a BitTorrent stream going on my network? Why is there Tor going on my network? Why is there a massive upload to Dropbox on my network? Those are kinds of things that you should flag and investigate. Again, there's plenty of tools that do that. When we were Extreme Networks, the Extreme Analytics tool was great for that. But there are lots of vendors that have tools that will help you discover those.
This is not a new bug. The sucker's been out there for a while. So, I would say, if I was going to encapsulate this, we recommend having a multifaceted approach to data security. Host, storage, data in motion across the network. You should be looking at all of this.
100%. 100%. So with that, that's going to cover this week's episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We would love to hear what you think. Do you have a topic you want us to cover? Do you have any thoughts on what we discussed today? Feedback at itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com, or at itsparkcast on X. So be sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. It really helps this channel grow. We'll be back next week with more news and opinions from the world of IT. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.